Rain clouds gathered above the city that afternoon, but outside Mercy General Hospital, the storm had already begun. The air was heavy with humidity and human indifference, the kind of grayness that seeps into your bones long before the rain ever falls. On the slick asphalt near the hospital's main gate stood a little girl, no older than 6, her small hands trembling as she clutched the folds of her sky-blue dress. Her hair, once tied neatly with a pink ribbon, now hung loose, tangled and damp with tears. Her cheeks were streaked with dirt and fear, and her tiny voice cracked as she tried to speak, her words barely rising above the hum of traffic and the cruel laughter of 3 men standing by the glass doors. Her eyes darted toward the hospital entrance, where her mother, pale and shaking, was being held back. And then, with all the courage a child could summon, she pointed toward her mother and cried out, "They won't let my mommy in. If you believe kindness can still change the world, if you believe good hearts still rise when darkness closes in, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes, because what happens next will remind you why humanity is still worth believing in." Her name was Sophie Turner, a child too young to understand cruelty but old enough to recognize fear. Her mother, Laura, had been working double shifts at a small diner for months, trying to keep up with rent and pay for the medication that kept her lungs from giving out. It had started with a simple infection, a cold, a cough, a fever, but it had worsened, week after week, until she could barely breathe without pain. The doctors had warned her she needed rest, but rest was a luxury for a woman raising a child alone. Every morning, she smiled through her exhaustion, telling Sophie that everything would be okay. And every night, she returned home with trembling hands, barely able to stand. That morning, as the gray dawn crept through their small apartment window, Laura collapsed in the kitchen. Sophie's screams echoed through the building, but no one came. So she did the only thing she could think of, she wrapped her mother's arm around her shoulders and began to drag her down the street. Barefoot, crying, calling for help. The city, as it often does, moved on around her. People passed by, cars honked, a few slowed but didn't stop. It was as if her desperation had turned invisible. And yet she kept going, her little heart pounding against her ribs as she spotted the hospital ahead, its tall glass doors glinting in the dull light like a promise. But fate, cruel as ever, had other plans. The main entrance of Mercy General was under renovation, its front steps blocked off by construction cones and scaffolding. The only open gate was a side entrance, temporarily watched by 3 contractors, men roughened by work and worn by indifference. They looked at the approaching woman and child not with empathy, but annoyance. One of them, tall, lean, with a cigarette between his lips and a gray sleeveless hoodie clinging to his sweat-damped shoulders, raised an eyebrow as Sophie stumbled toward them, clutching her mother's arm. "Help!" she cried. "Please, she can't breathe." The man didn't move. He blew smoke into the air, muttered something under his breath, and laughed. The second man, shorter but broader, with a red flannel shirt and greasy hair, crossed his arms. "Wait for shift change," he said coldly, his tone the sound of someone who had long stopped caring. The third, leaning lazily against a railing, pulled out his phone and started recording, chuckling as if he were watching a show. Sophie tugged at their sleeves, begging. Her tears fell on their boots, her small hands clinging to their pant legs. "Please, my mommy's sick," she cried. Again, but the laughter only grew. One of them called her a brat, another told her to go find a nurse. They didn't see a child in pain, they saw an inconvenience. And all the while, Laura's breathing grew shallower. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, her vision swimming, until her knees buckled. She fell against the glass door with a soft, heart-wrenching thud, sliding slowly down until she was sitting on the cold concrete, her eyes half closed. Sophie screamed, the kind of scream that slices through the air and makes even the wind stop for a moment. But still, no one came. A few pedestrians turned their heads, only to look away again. Some walked faster, others whispered, unwilling to intervene. The world had learned to ignore suffering, especially when it wasn't their own. Then came the sound that changed everything. It began as a distant rumble, deep and steady, like thunder rolling over the city. The men at the gate turned, frowning. The noise grew louder until it became unmistakable, the roar of motorcycle engines. 5 of them, sleek in black, cutting through the gray drizzle like a stormfront of steel and fire. They slowed as they approached the hospital, parking neatly along the curb. When the engines fell silent, the only sound left was the ticking of cooling metal and the faint whimper of a little girl. At the front of the group was a man built like iron and time itself. Ryder Callan, late 40s, weathered by miles of road and years of scars. His beard was streaked with gray, his eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses that reflected both the storm above and the pain below. The black leather vest he wore bore two simple patches, Hell's Angels and RL. CHLLS. His arms were inked with memories, names of brothers lost, dates that no longer needed explaining. Around him stood four others, each one silent, their presence commanding enough to make the air itself seem to pause. Ryder scanned the scene slowly, the crying child, the unconscious woman, the three laughing men. His jaw tightened. For a long second, he said nothing. Sophie, trembling, took one hesitant step forward. "Please," she whispered. "They won't let my mommy in." Something in that voice, small, broken, desperate, cracked through years of hardness inside him. Ryder crouched down in front of her, the leather of his vest creaking softly. The reflection of her teary face shimmered on his sunglasses. Then, he stood. Without a word, he handed his gloves to one of his men, turned toward the gate, and began to walk. His boots struck the pavement in slow, deliberate steps, each one echoing louder than the last. The three thugs straightened up, uneasy. The one in the hoodie tried to laugh it off, but his voice faltered as the five bikers closed in, spreading out like a wall of shadow. Ryder stopped just inches away from the gate. His voice, when he spoke, was low and steady. "Move." The man in the hoodie sneered. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Ryder didn't blink. Final warning. For a moment, no one breathed. Then, behind him, one of his brothers, massive, bald, with arms like tree trunks, shifted his weight and let his hand rest on his belt chain. Another, younger biker with long brown hair tilted his head slightly, watching. That was all it took. The man in the hoodie swallowed hard and stepped aside. The others followed quickly, muttering excuses, eyes down. Ryder said nothing more. He turned, gently lifted Laura's limp arm over his shoulder, and carried her through the glass doors. Inside, chaos erupted, but this time, the good kind. Nurses rushed forward with a stretcher, doctors shouted orders, and a gurney was wheeled into place. Sophie ran beside her mother, clutching her hand until the nurses guided her back. "She'll be okay," one of them whispered. "You did the right thing." Outside, the bikers waited. Silent. Rain began to fall, drops tapping against their jackets like the world was finally washing itself clean. When Ryder stepped back out, Sophie ran straight to him. Her small arms wrapped around his waist as she sobbed against his leather vest. He knelt down, wiped the tears from her cheeks, and smiled faintly. "You're braver than most grown men I know," he told her softly. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded $20 bill, and placed it in her tiny palm. "For your mom's medicine," he said. On the bill, scrawled in black ink, were three simple words, "For her strength." As the engines roared back to life, hospital staff gathered by the windows, watching in stunned silence. They didn't see outlaws that day, they saw protectors. They saw kindness wearing leather and steel. Ryder and his crew rode off slowly, disappearing into the misty rain, leaving behind the echo of thunder and the memory of mercy. When Laura woke up later that evening, the world looked different. The first thing she saw was her daughter, asleep on a chair beside her bed, clutching that folded bill like it was treasure. "Who helped us?" she whispered when Sophie stirred awake. Sophie smiled, sleepy-eyed, and said, "Angels, Mommy. Hell's Angels." If this story touched your heart, if you believe kindness can come from where you least expect it, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes, where real stories remind us what humanity still means.